Hey, this is Travis Gafford, the double lift expert, and you're watching Thorn's YouTube channel.
Jensen, best known as the star mid laner, former MVP candidate of Cloud9, who just finished top 4 at the Season 8 World Championship, has left Cloud9 and will be joining Team Liquid, presumably as their starting NALCS mid laner. Now, as usual, I'm going to break this video down using my formula for when players leave or join a roster. So you start with the roster they left and you ask, was it the right move to remove or let this individual go? Now, I have to say, starting there, this seems from the outside like the wrong move. Like, I realize with Jensen himself getting benched in the summer and with Jack showing through his trust in Reapered that no one player is above the org, and if they feel as though players aren't practicing or playing with the right attitude or mentality towards how the team's going to play, then they're willing to remove those players and they're willing to put the pressure on the player to win back his spot, as Jensen obviously did, was able to get the NALCS finals, was able to win the gauntlet, was able to finish top 4 at Worlds. Okay, that all looks like a happy story on the other end of the equation, but it's tough to know from the outside what were the issues internally? Why was it? Because it's a big deal when a player like Jensen, the face of your team, basically, the franchise player, gets benched and someone else is playing instead of him. And then we hear it's not necessarily just due to scrims or individual level, but perhaps attitude issues or how you're being coached, etc., attitude toward co-workers. Sure, that can be something which you could see could be the seed from which you could grow problems that might mean you need to remove the person, or it's just time to go our separate ways. Like, you'll never be able to reclaim what you used to have before the benching. I don't know. The results seemed like there was no issue in that sense. So in a world in which Cloud9 had any say in keeping them, I feel like it was the wrong move to let him go, because unless you're literally bringing in perks or caps or some, maybe even like Kuro, some either big name Korean or just a fabulous level European mid laner who's at their peak of their form at the moment, I can't really see how you can in good conscience replace Jensen and expect to be as good a team. Like, I personally think Jensen, even at the end, was overall the best player in the team for a long, long time. Obviously, he's held that aggregate top form level where he's been overall the best player in Cloud9 for many years now. I even thought in terms of Jack, the owner of Cloud9, and his mentality towards how he's built his teams, Jensen seemed to be the guy who, he was obviously his baby. He brought him in to replace High in that legendary lineup we all remember from going on from Season 5 Spring. And I already thought, not only is that a ballsy move to bring him in, but ever since then, Jack has seemed to have at Jensen's back. And it seemed as though he was actually pivoting to Jensen being the main player he was going to keep and build around, and that was going to be his Bjergsen. That was going to be the face of Cloud9 in the NALCS. And if it became a team that was able to get championships and have placings like make a deep run at Worlds, it would be with Jensen in the lineup. That seemed to be something quite clear, quite certain, both from how publicly Jack presented Cloud9 and Jensen and how privately I've heard him talk about him and his kind of personal relationship with him as a player. With that said, I do think Jensen bristled a little bit at how he was treated this summer. I noticed he was one of those players who did the thing where you low-key like a tweet that I make that's implying you can't just replace star players with bench players without having to overtly say it. And I think maybe later on he had to remove the because he probably got told to by someone in the org. But I always like the sort of low-key winks that some players can give in that sense. Now, in terms of the angle of maybe he didn't have a choice in terms of Jack, okay, I could see that as well. Maybe Jensen just says, listen, I want to go elsewhere. Team Liquid's a better spot for me. I've spent my time in Cloud9. I enjoyed it, but let's just both go a different path. Yeah, I can see that. And certainly there's a level of maturity if indeed Jack was in the position to let him go in that sense. Or maybe he really was just, I haven't looked into this, was he on some level of free agency where he could just choose to go? Was there an option in his contract to choose to go? I don't know. But if it's Cloud9 having any choice, I personally would keep them if I was them. And I'd tell him whatever you need to. We'll build a team around you. We'll get the right players. We're going to be a top team in the NALCS. We'll go further at Worlds. You can do it at Cloud9 rather than Team Liquid. So if I'm a Cloud9 fan, I'd be upset and I would justifiably be wondering what's going on with Cloud9 now. And unless I hear a big name signing or a big move, I'm sorry, trust the process, trust Reaper, that's all great. And I'd love to do it if I'm a Cloud9 fan. but it's going to be hard not to see a big name like Jensen there. And if there's anyone else not comparable, if you're starting with a rookie, you're starting with a lesser name, that's going to be a real tough pill to swallow. In terms of Team Liquid getting him, this one to me seems overwhelmingly the right move. First of all, Paul Belter certainly in North America can compete. You can win the championship with him. You can have one of the best LCS, one of the best Western teams with him. But I've seen him now at enough World Championships where I'm kind of out on him as a Worlds player. Like, if he's on a lower level team, fair enough, and they climb their way to third or second, some plucky team. But in terms of the best NALCS team, if you want to perform internationally, you want to do well, at best he's only going to be decent. He's never going to be a dominant international player. So you couple that with the situation Team Liquid's already in when they've got Impact, who first of all is in kind of a similar position, scaled down in terms of like, obviously he's not one of the best top players in the world, but again, domestically he's very good. You can win the championship with him domestically. Internationally, in the past, okay, he's better relative to what Paul Belter is at the moment than Paul Belter is, but he also, by the time this Worlds came around, looked about Paul Belter level, but except he's an import slot, so that also doesn't make as much sense. But you know, inevitably in League of Legends, you're going to have tank top metas, and in a tank top meta, Impact is not only a very competent player, he is going to be one of the best Western players in terms of Western region players at top lane if it's mainly tanks. And so in a world which is mainly tanks, but we have Doublelift as our AD carry, and we have Jensen as our mid laner, now I'm liking that angle. Because yeah, we're not going for a pure triple threat team. Very few teams are ever going to be able to have that. But we have the very strong supportive top laner with the strong carry, mid and AD carry position. So that now for me, gives a real team balance to Team Liquid that they didn't have before. It was so clearly the Doublelift show before, and everything else was really good. Like if you'd have had Paul Belter and a carry top laner, that would have made sense. If you have Impact and then a carry mid laner like you're going to have now, that makes sense. It was enough to win NA with just Doublelift and then competent or above average or good players for the West at those positions, but you can't have two of them not be a legit threat at mid lane and top, especially obviously not at this particular meta for this Worlds. They got really kind of fucked on that angle there. If there's been some of the past metas for Worlds, like Season 5, Season 6, I could have seen a world in which Team Liquid could have had much more success than they did overall. So let's consider this. Beyond the Paul Belter angle, Team Liquid clearly needed a legit star player at top or mid for my money. Now, personally, I thought mid was the obvious one. I hoped it might be Froggen coming back to play, or maybe they could get a big signing like a Perks. But in the world where you aren't getting those players, or he's just another option, I think Jensen's certainly a very legitimate shout in himself. I think you can make an argument for him being a better pick than either of those players. You could argue he's better than Froggen at the moment. I don't necessarily whether I'd say that's true or not. I want to see Froggen in a top team again. You could argue he's actually adapted to the LCS, whereas we have no idea how Perks would cope outside of Europe or cope with the spotlight of being in an NA team. Again, so Jensen's kind of a better aggregate between all of them in that sense of having a lot of these qualities. Because first of all, we know he can be an individual monster. For my money, I made this tweet a while ago. I think beyond, in fact, basically from Season 6 onwards, I think that Season 6 and most of Season 7, I personally think that Jensen was a better individual mid laner than Bjergsen was a better individual mid laner. Like, wasn't an individual mid laner rather. Like, that's just my opinion. You don't have to agree. I realise Bjergsen's teams won more often. I realise Bjergsen's teams won head to head. I realise in some of the head to heads, you could even argue Bjergsen outplayed him at times. But personally, I think Jensen was the better player. I think Bjergsen had the better team. And I think Bjergsen had not even just better team alone, but teammates of a sufficient quality that they came through in the clutch to win. I don't know if you look at some of Jensen's teammates, if they have done that very often, if they're going to do that with it when he leaves, or if some of them had ever done that, quite frankly. I also think generally, even though it's a toss-up on this one, I think generally, personally, I think TSM was probably, I wouldn't say coached better, because I don't think Path's a better coach than Reapered, but I think in terms of team culture, with what Reginald established there, he was able to put a better kind of pressure on his players, whereas for a while in Cloud9, it seemed almost like, it's harsh to say this, but they accepted being second or third best and thought that was good enough. I actually always appreciate that in TSM, being second best wasn't good enough for LCS, and you were going to be pressured as if you were in ninth place, if you were in second place. So I think Reginald had a better effect on the overall team. So again, that's not really a Bjergsen-Jensen issue. Individually, I thought Jensen was a fabulous player. Sure, you can say in Season 8, he didn't have as much success. Yeah, the team was changing, the coaching philosophy was different, the meta changed very rapidly, they brought in other players. So, okay, there's angles from which we can kind of offset some of that, but you look at how many years Jensen was a fabulous mid laner for Cloud9. You look at the fact that He always had a very strong mindset for how he wanted to play the game and how he thinks the game should be played. I think that's a great thing for a team like Team Liquid, where you've got all these supportive elements, and then you've got Doublelift, and now you can have another person who knows how they want to play, they know how to play their role, and then how they want to fit into the bigger part of it. So I think if Kane does a good job coaching with Doublelift and Jensen, not only can he have 2 MVP candidates, but he can have arguably the 2 best players in the league, and he can have, as a result, a much more dangerous squad overall. Like, personally, I think Jensen was easily the best thing about Cloud9 pretty much the whole time he was there. I thought, like, 2016, 2017, people overrated some of his teammates. Yes, they were good players, and they were good LCS players, but this angle that he ever had, like, better players than Bjergsen, or he had the best players on his team, I always thought was a bit overplayed, and I thought they benefited a lot from playing with Jensen, quite frankly, and I think some of those players will look much worse without him in their team. I've added in the whole coaching angle already. Now, I think it's actually a massive boon that Jensen's played in the NALCS specifically for so long, because as a result, we can go ahead and assume he's not just going to straight up flunk like some extremely good players from other regions might, because they've never lived in NA before. They've never played in the NALCS before. They've never felt a very specific type of pressure or spotlight or attention or the culture clash. He's not going to have that issue like some of the EU mids that come over now might in fact do. You never know. Doesn't look like Febiven particularly enjoyed his time. Seems like Power of Evil probably regrets the move. I know some of the players in Europe who were fabulous players who didn't move for exactly that reason. They were comfortable where they were on good teams, so why risk it just for some more money? That's not a problem with Jensen. We've already seen him play in the LCS long enough. He's also, obviously, you'd ideally want to replace Paul Belter with someone who also has international experience. Jensen has bucket loads of international experience. He's been in like 4 Worlds. He's been in the playoffs 3 times. One of those 3 times he went to the semi-finals. He's beaten an actual Korean team in a best of 5 on LAN. That had basically never happened for a Western team before, especially not at that level. This is all impressive stuff, really nice stuff to be an accomplishment on your resume. Now he's coming in Team Liquid where, first of all, he hasn't won the NALCS before they have. Then again, they haven't had the international experience and he has. So he's got a very interesting set of people he can learn from in some sense, and they can learn from him and they can trust him. I think it's crucial to me that he is someone I can guarantee, without having to talk to him, I would go ahead and put heavy money that someone like Doublelift wanted this move. That Doublelift sees him just as when he moved to TSM when Bjergsen wanted more help and wanted another star. This is someone Doublelift can relate to as a superstar player, and a superstar player who hasn't been able to win in the past with some of his teams, someone he can trust because he knows that guy can play his role to a very high level and won't just fall apart in playoff games or choke it up in the LCS or be not as good as he is at the beginning of a split. So if you Doublelift, that's someone else you can rely on and know this guy's going to go hard and well, and it's not just about me. I'm not the only win condition. It's not about me getting fed and then winning the game. We've got a couple of ways to win the game now, and in fact, hopefully Doublelift's learned from his experience with Bjergsen, where they had that kind of mentality. They were the 2 real leaders of the team. They were the 2 star players, the 2 ones competing against each other for MVPs. Hopefully he learned some of the aspects of how he then dealt with his relationship with Bjergsen and whether or not they had great communication or great mentality or how they blamed each other. Hopefully he takes some of the lessons from that relationship, applies them to Jensen, helps Jensen get to a higher level, and himself is able to interact with his teammate better, and they can really be a true dual threat both in the LCS but more importantly internationally as well. Now that goes the other way as well. I also think Jensen and Doublelift will find shared ground, and that Jensen's going to be happy to have a true MVP caliber player playing alongside him, because I know sure you can maybe make the case for Smoothie in past years, but that ain't the same as a threat coming out of a lane. Like a top laner, an AD carry, a mid laner, these are the positions where you want someone else you can trust who's a superstar at one of those roles. Then you feel like the whole game isn't on you. You don't feel like you're the main win condition. You don't feel as much direct pressure, but then you can also put pressure on yourself to perform because you got another monster alongside you. So I think for Jensen this is very good psychologically, and I think for whatever reason he had his partial drop off this year, I think this can revitalize him and really bring him back to that killer focus of the player I saw in Season 6 who looked like he thought he was the best player in the LCS, thought he was the best player in the Worlds, in the West rather, and could go to Worlds and be a successful talent. Then you add in, he's going to be playing with Xmithie. I can't wait for this. Xmithie's the sort of jungler who I want people like Jensen to be playing with. I want them to get the lane support that they need. I want them to be in position to snowball. Since he plays on the bottom half of the map anyway, all that Xmithie needs to do is go between him and Doublelift. Now, yes, it's not as simple as that. Obviously, within the meta, he will still gank the top lane. But the point here is, These are the players. You know which way your bread is buttered if you're at Smithy, who your players are to get ahead, how to win the game, and who you want to help the most to get lane advantages, to get kills, to get going in a game. And imagine the team fights if these two guys are fed and if these two guys are going. Then add in the angle that Impact can be there to play a tank. Now, sure, you might ask what happens because you've got Impact, you've got Ole, these are players that are imports. Well, first of all, the whole residency issue. Jensen himself is coming up for residency, I think in the summer now. I think Impact has it, if not now, then after the spring split. So that can already work itself out. You don't necessarily have to change any players. I personally think Ole was something of an issue himself as well. Like, I think he's a good player, but I'm not sure he's necessarily suited for Doublelift and for this Team Liquid squad. I would maybe have liked him on a different team. So if they want to change that and bring in an NA support or someone else along those lines, you can do that. Otherwise, you can wait out the residency and just have all these players. I actually think, personally, the residency issues are bullshit, but that's a separate video in itself. Team Liquid already looked like the best NALCS lineup, not just from the way they won, but the eye test showed they looked a lot crisp, a lot more polished than most of the other teams, and from the get-go, sure, they kept some players who played together in the past in CLG. I think the Worlds angle was really overblown. I do think they underperformed, and added to MSI, it was very underwhelming, but I think it showed clear structural issues in terms of coaching aspects. I think it showed that you can't just have one threat on a legit international level as they had just Doublelift on AD carry. I think that it showed some of the flaws that a number of those players have now had going to Worlds. All of them, whether in Cloud9, whether in CLG, whether in the Immortals, we've seen some of them be flawed, especially in certain metas. Hopefully this addresses some of those aspects. I don't think they sucked as massively as people made out. I think they had a bad group, and I think they had exactly the wrong meta for what their team was composed for. I still think they were one of the better North American teams. I think if you could have put them in a different meta, they might have done better than some of the other teams out there. I would, if I were them, not only with this great move, and possibly support, I would be heavily looking into sports psychology people. I would be looking into coaching aspects of how we coach people outside of the game. And these were the angles, I think, in which you elevate the current Team Liquid course. I think Jensen joined Team Liquid, great move. I could see him having a fabulous career, getting the championships he wants, getting the MVPs he wants, being able to best out the likes of his rivals, Bjergsen, etc., and the guys over in Europe. Again, I can see him going to Worlds. And this time, Team Liquid, and more importantly, Doublelift, could actually have a legit chance to go deep at Worlds. I know Doublelift did on TSM, he just never made good on it. This could be the one that makes it actually happen. This video was kindly supported by Andreas Snazor Westerland, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, Tobias Bernasconi, Ollie J, Nate DOGG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, James Harding, Vexy, Robert Baxter, Lucas Kurza Chesney. And a special thanks, as always, goes out to my man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest to feature in my upcoming content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want teasers from my upcoming content? See who the next guests are going to be. Perhaps you'd like to take part in a discussion about esports with me. Well, any and all of the above exclusives are available for my patrons, so put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link below.